What's up, creators? This is Salvador Briggman, the host of the Crowdfunding Demystified Podcast. And man, oh man, I think today's episode is really going to be quite enlightening for people out there that are like, you know what, I got a kind of offbeat product. Can I really raise money from this? And then you see and you're watching these campaigns launch on Kickstarter, and you go and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this guy raised this much for this product. And I do think that, today's guest, first of all, it's an incredibly well-designed product. It looks beautiful. It also functions, from what I hear. This is more of like a not safe for work product. So if you do have children in the room, or you got your girlfriend or your boyfriend, just be aware, maybe put in the earbuds, right, for this specific episode. But we actually talked to the creator, who's able to raise over $89,000 from 1,481 backers. So nearly $500,000 for a new product in a new category, which they've invented. And it's just a little bit offbeat. I think it's kind of interesting, unique, and I really do think you're going to find this very interesting in terms of the podcast episode. But in addition, he came on the podcast and really, to his testament and credit, just shared so many incredible tips, advice, nuggets of crowdfunding gold with us. So that way you can go out there, you can take this information, you can act upon it, because knowledge is only potential power, and you can also crush it with your campaign. So hats off to today's guest. I think he was very transparent. It almost surprised me, just some of the advice that he was throwing out there like nothing. It's incredible that we have such incredibly generous guests. I would use that word, generous guests, that come on this show. And this is, for me, a big value and an important part of CrowdCrux. So I started CrowdCrux in 2012, and it's always been one of my missions to put out high quality education for people out there that maybe this is their first time or their 10th time, and they're looking to just up their game, right? And they want to have their fingers on the pulse when it comes to what's working right now with crowdfunding. And that's really why I launched this podcast in 2015, but why I'm also, so darn passionate about crowdfunding, because it's exciting, man. The fact that people that you've never met before can breathe life into your invention, into your product, into your mission, and can stay there and say, yes, I'm willing to become a backer, I'm willing to pledge to become a part of this project. I think that's inspirational, but I also think it's really the way that humanity works, which is that we kind of step up for each other in order to, lead the charge and come out with new innovations and new ways to actually think about the problems that beset us in life. So that's why I started this show, not to get too long-winded about that, but I do have people like, Sal, can you please ease up on the motivation and the inspiration, all those kind of talk? Can you just tell me how it works? Can you just share with me a very simple, logical, slender plan? That's a paint by numbers formula. That's a blueprint even going into a launch that I can follow, that I can just take and execute upon and be able to get those results. And for those people, what I've done is I've designed an entire book that goes through this in a very minute detail. It's really the detail-oriented, tactical approach to launching a successful Kickstarter campaign, and I call it the Kickstarter Launch Formula. So if you want to get your hands on that, number one, go and type that into Amazon Kickstarter Launch Formula, but I also have a great Audible book. If you want to listen to it on the go, you can go and check that out at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. That link is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. And that's really for those people that want to take action, that are excited about this, but are ready to also move forward. Go to that link, crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. All right, without further ado, let's get into today's podcast episode and discover how this creator was able to raise over $489,000 from more than 1,400 backers. It's coming up right after this. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified Podcast. Today we are lucky enough to speak with a creator who's been able to reach the $484,000 mark on Kickstarter, attracting more than 1,000 backers for Groove Thing, the world's first internal music player. Seduce your senses, music should be felt, not heard. Lose yourself and be touched by music with the Groove Thing. We're lucky enough to speak with the inventor and founder, Michael. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, great to be here.
Definitely, man. Maybe you can fill in some gaps in that introduction and just tell us a bit about your project here and also a bit about you.
Yeah. So Groove Thing, we like to say, as you said, it's the world's first internal music player. It combines high fidelity audio with tactile sensation to turn music into an intimate full body experience. And what that means is that it enables you to simultaneously hear and feel your music. from the inside out.
Very cool.
It sits in a new category, kind of halfway between high-end sexual health and wellness and a high-end audio, like a really nice set of speakers or headphones. And the goal is really to expand how people experience music, not just as something you hear, but as something that you feel. It reproduces sound with enough fidelity that you can actually feel the difference between a high note versus a low note. You feel textural differences between piano and guitar. You even feel key changes. And we think it offers something really unique. We've had 180 people test it, and the feedback has been wild. Nobody's felt anything like this before.
Super cool, man. What were you doing before you got started with this business? Have you done other inventions at all, or what were you doing before this?
Yeah, so this is kind of a left turn for me professionally. My background is in software and tech. I've worked at large tech companies like Google and Uber, was a senior leader, led large teams of engineers and product managers, generally all in software. In my spare time, I'm a hobbyist. I do a lot of DIY work around the house. I'm a lifelong passionate music lover, and I've spent a long time, actually a lot of my life, as it turns out, when I look backwards, creating unusual multisensory experiences around music visualizers. I've built something called a sound bed that basically turns surface of a bed into the surface of a subwoofer, and other playthings like that. And this grew out of some ideas I'd had in my head for a long time of, if you connect an A to a B to a C, I think you'd have something that would resonate inside you. And wouldn't that be interesting?
How long are you thinking about an idea before you begin to really, focus on that and create prototypes and those kinds of things?
Yeah, so this one had been stewing for a very long time, but I thought it required impractical equipment. So the things that I thought would be necessary to assemble it were large, expensive, and heavy. And then I discovered that there were small, lightweight, inexpensive versions, and I bought one just on a lark from a hardware source. And one weekend, about a month after I bought it, I just went into the garage and said, you know what, let's make this thing. And the very first prototype actually turned out to be very, very compelling.
Love that. And I think a lot of people, they have ideas and they just kind of struggle to get started with turning that into something physical. Do you think it's really just being willing to kind of roll up the sleeves and try something out, or what do you think kind of holds people back from moving forward with those?
Yeah, I think so. For me, in a lot of parts of my professional and design life, I'm a perfectionist. So it's hard to force myself to create something crude. And in this case, I gave myself that challenge. I said, you know what, you've had this idea in your head for so long. Your goal this afternoon is to find the fastest way to connect the A to the B to the C. That's it. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be polished. Just make it happen. And then let's decide if it's worth investing more time in it. And indeed, that's what I wound up doing. At the end of that few hours and a few trips to the hardware store, I had this thing in my hand that looked like a science fair project. It was really ugly. It had screws poking in the wrong way. It had wire nuts sticking out, but it functionally did exactly the same thing as the commercial version that we're launching is going to do. And that was a proof point. And that's the most useful thing is construct it and figure out if it works or not, fail fast if it doesn't.
I think one of the other elements there is this idea of like getting feedback, right, as you're going through the process. And you have something that's so, new category, like you said. What are your thoughts on this idea of involving other people to get feedback and the excitement that can come from that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
That is definitely key, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, so I constructed this thing, and I was the first user to try it, and I was blown away by it. But I constructed a thing that plays to all of my interests. On top of my music and my tech background, I've spent 20 years in sex positive community. So I have a political passion for pleasure and for opening up those things for everybody. But I'm an extreme. I'm extreme enough that I invented this thing, and so it was very important to try it with other people. And first I tried it with just a handful of people just to validate, am I the only one that thinks this is interesting? And that showed that the idea was valid. Okay, I got that far with it. But it really took a lot of testing with a lot of different bodies, a lot of different, just a wide variety of people to narrow in how it's used, what shapes it needs to be. This is something that has to fit different bodies, different styles, different types. And so that iteration was key, and really listening to what people tell you. This is one of the hard things, is figuring out what advice to pay attention to versus what to ignore, because you have to have some focus. You can't cater to every little bit of feedback. But you do have to see the trends, and you have to change your design and change your marketing and change your positioning according to how people are actually using your thing, not just how you think it should be.
So it's kind of a fluid process, right? As I'm kind of taking away here, and it's something that's kind of changing and evolving over time. Has Kickstarter always been in your mind there? Is that something that you've always been aware of? I see you've backed a good number of projects here, you guys. Has this always been something you've been thinking about?
Yeah, so I'm a tech geek. I like anything with buttons and LEDs that lights up. I just go for gadgets and whatnot. So I've been backing Kickstarters and Indiegogo campaigns for a long time. Um, I'm I'm pretty sure that same evening that I was like, you know what, I think this is going to be a product. I think this is going to be my new career pivot. I forgot to say I've been working on this thing for full time for 2 years now, since the day it was invented, basically.
Wow.
And Kickstarter, I'm pretty sure occurred to me that night as like, this would be a good way to launch this. I didn't know enough about the creator side of it yet to be confident of that, so I had to start learning a bit more. It's one thing to know it from the backer side, and I needed to understand how do you actually structure a campaign, how do you actually make them successful. But yeah, pretty early on, that became the launch plan. It just made a lot of sense as a way to raise the manufacturing funds without having to self-fund that.
As a backer, do you have any insights in terms of what you'd like to see from creators and the types of projects that you'd like to be involved with from the backer standpoint?
I think as a backer, people always ask me, aren't you worried that some of these are scams or things like that? And I have come across, I think, 2 at this point in the dozens that I've backed, and they leave a mark. It makes you more paranoid. And so the thing that I like to see as a backer is just validation. I like to know that the people behind it are real. That ups credibility for me a lot if they have a real presence in the world and I can look them up. I like to see updates. I like to see real photos of updates. And again, a lot of this is from scars from, the 2 projects or so that I backed that just weren't real. They were scams. And now looking backwards, I can see the pattern. I can see how they didn't provide that validity. It really wasn't transparent. It wasn't real.
Too good to be true.
Yeah, I like to see truth points, checkpoints that really I'm like, yeah, that seems valid. That seems real.
And thinking about that, I think that also, really highlights one major element, which is, everyone's online here and you really haven't met the person who's creating it, right? So you're kind of building that relationship over the internet, which is insane, to think about that.
It really is. And it's funny. I went through this process of the Kickstarter and finished it, and in some ways it feels like it's a template that was followed or a pattern. There's lots of projects that do this, but when I look at what just happened, 1,400 strangers just gave me $480,000. Like that's crazy, and amazing that there is a culture and a community and a structure that's been built here that enables that. It's pretty incredible.
Right. I mean, I think it's always blows my mind that crowdfunding is something that exists, but it's so cool, and there's a magic element to it, I think, as well. What was kind of going through your mind the night before you went live with this campaign? What were you thinking? What were you feeling the night before you went live?
The main thing I was feeling was, God, I really want to sleep. It was exhausting, really exhausting getting to that day. And mostly hope and relief. It was a very long buildup. We'd known for about 2 years that we were going to do this thing, and it was this future tense thing for the longest time. We're going to launch this thing by crowdfund, and it was a relief to just finally be there. To actually, there was a lot of work that went into it, a lot of my perfectionism of every little detail on the campaign, trying to get it right, and just being relieved that, okay, tomorrow we're on a path and we don't have to get to the start point anymore. We're starting a downhill slide of just like, this thing is going to carry us at this point. We are on a ride. It's not that we have to get to the top of the ride. Right.
So a combination of different emotions, it sounds like, and definitely lack of sleep is one of those items, right, with the launch. The first week, we'll just say you fast forward end of the first week, what kind of happened, and you just kind of walk us through what your experience was like.
Yeah, so the first day even was quite a splash out of the gate. We raised $100,000 in the first 12 hours.
Wow.
We were jumping up and down. That first day we set a record. We were, within hours actually, we were the highest funded Kickstarter for an insertable sex toy in history.
Wow.
There have been some of them on Kickstarter. Kickstarter didn't used to allow adult products. They do now. There are other campaigns that you can go find in that category. But we were really delighted, that we left a mark like that. The end of the first week was a mix of things. We loved that I forget the number we were at. I think we were probably at something like 150K. And we were excited that like it was going. But we were also getting a little taste of reality of that slowdown that happens. The first few days are all that pent up demand, all that work that you do on the pre-campaign is a release of pressure. And now you're into kind of a more traditional marketing challenge where you're just trying to drive traffic to this new thing. And it's a big slowdown. And so the end of the week was a lot of feeling of, oh, we got our work cut out for us. These next few weeks are still going to be, we're going to have our nose to the grindstone to figure out how to drive traffic.
Right. And I'm sure that's kind of, at the same time, a little bit scary, but at the same time, there's such a huge audience right out there.
Yes.
That can benefit from this. You've obviously been able to grow a tremendous amount as well, over 400K.
Yeah.
So you're doing well, I think, when it comes to that. One of the points kind of in our pre-show is this idea of like a rough learning curve.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I try to help with this podcast. So I really appreciate you being on and just sharing your story. Do you mind expanding a bit on this rough learning curve for, as you say, the uninitiated? I love that word.
And I realized actually after I made that point, I may have misconstrued it. I actually mean on the backer side. So it's so easy. I suspect that most Kickstarter creators are also backers. Like that's my guess. It would make a lot of sense that like you approach this platform if you've experienced it before. And as a result, you have a bias that you don't realize. You have backed a campaign or many campaigns, and you understand how the mechanics of this site work. It really, really struck me with people who would email me and ask for support and things like that, how much the uninitiated Kickstarter buyer struggles and can easily misunderstand the Kickstarter backer process. It really is a high learning curve for a lot of people. And so you need to realize going in with a project that depending on the nature of your demographics, who are going to be your backers, you might have most of your buyers really struggling with your checkout. It is a lot for a newbie to fully understand how a Kickstarter campaign works, what backing means, what a pledge is versus a reward. There's a disconnect in your checkout between the dollar amount potentially and the actual reward you're going to pick. Not everyone actually realizes when they hit the site that you might have a 6-month lead time on shipping. I had a surprising number of people email me asking, hey, so when am I going to get my product? And so it's just something to be aware of. And I think it varies depending on the type of object you're trying to create produce or project, the type of project you're producing. And it just depends on your audience. But that really struck me. I knew that it would be hard for some people. I did not appreciate fully just how different a process it is and how weird it would be for so many of my backers.
Do you think that's just a symptom of, or I guess a needing for an FAQ or a document ahead of time, or what do you think the solution is to that?
It's a fundamentally hard problem because as anybody who's ever tried to do marketing or create materials for people or instructions, like roughly speaking, people don't read. They don't read the stuff that you push at them. They have very short attention spans. So this is a really hard problem. In some sense, I think a video might be the right thing in the modern era, to give somebody a quick orientation.
Right.
But that's a distraction from your main marketing. I guess as I'm talking out loud and thinking about this, if I could snap my fingers, the thing I'd want to solve this problem is I'd love for Kickstarter, as soon as you hit that back a reward screen, I'd love for them to have a little embedded video that says, hey, brand new to Kickstarter, click here for a quick orientation. I think that might be the best possible thing, but I don't have control over that.
Right. And that can be a little bit of a challenge and something as well to communicate there, because you don't have control over the platform. If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured, I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist, and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist, fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. In thinking about this, you've been able to get a significant amount of funding. You've been learning a lot about your community. It's clear your product is resonating. What's been the most rewarding piece of this for you? Has it been the funding or the validation? What do you feel like has been the most rewarding piece?
I think the most rewarding piece for me is the validation that so many people are interested in the topic of the thing I've created. This is a new category of thing. It's a new category of thing that doesn't show visually. If you invent a new multi-tool or you invent a robot that writes on the wall, you can show a video or a picture and the consumer sees the thing they're getting. They see the experience that the thing is going to create for them. For mine, you can't directly see the experience this is going to create for you. Our campaign video shows people experiencing it, but that's still not full validation. You can't see, if I buy it, it looks like this, and that's the experience I'm getting. So I think the biggest fun for me, the most rewarding part, is that despite that limitation, there's so much interest in this product. On top of the campaign itself, we have an enormous pre-campaign mailing list from people that clicked on our ad and gave us their email address. We get a lot of interaction. We get a lot of interest in the descriptions of this product. So yeah, the funnest part for me is just validation that there's other weirdos out there that are interested in the same thing that I came up with.
I think too, just looking at your page, I think you've done a great job of communicating it. And you have some really cool GIFs and graphics and visualizations and all of that here that you've pulled together on the page.
Thanks. I did not expect to use my programming and math chops for a marketing challenge, but the animated GIF that shows the waveforms was actually something that I spent a few hours of coding to create properly, because I had this thing in my head and I couldn't quite draw it correctly, so I scripted it.
And I can also say, the branding and the way you've incorporated colors, it kind of almost has like this approachable feel, and it makes this really fun, like thematic experience on the page, I'd say.
I'm delighted to hear that, because that was definitely the goal. We went through a very in-depth branding exercise, and we picked some unusual things. The bright green that's our primary brand color, this is not found in other sexual health brands, and we like that. We like that we stand apart because we actually think that we're a lot different. And so we wanted something that was fun and approachable, but we didn't want to fall into the same lane as other companies that operate in a sexual space, because we really think that we're different with this audio side. It's a different category of product.
Would you say that, in looking at the feedback you're getting and the demand, is this something where you're going to be coming out with more products under this brand? Are you thinking of taking this experience and launching new inventions? What are your thoughts on the future here?
Very much so. This is the first in a line of products that we think we can produce that combine sound and sensation in interesting ways, and intimate sensation in particular. We definitely have some stuff planned for the future. Yes. Exciting.
Very exciting. For someone who's just kind of getting started and, maybe is in that they have a prototype stage and they're thinking about doing a campaign, but, there's a big gap between where they are and where they want to be, what advice would you give them on the marketing front or on pulling together a page here?
The biggest thing, and I heard it ahead of time and I didn't fully heed the advice, marketing costs are going to be higher than you think. The fundamental problem of selling things is getting it in front of the person who wants to buy it. And as much as we like to think that this happens organically, and as much as we like to think that, well, our product is different and people are going to organically tell each other about it, that tends not to happen at scale. That's a very rare product that can actually spread like that. And so you have to be prepared to do the thing of spending money, to find your audience and market in front of them. And this is the other thing that I really learned becoming a creator is you see these Kickstarter campaigns from the outside, and you might have clicked on an ad to get to it, but you have in your head that it is this Kickstarter community thing, and that all this traffic has been driven by something organic. And most of the time, I've really learned, particularly for the really large campaigns, they're backed by a substantial marketing budget. That's how you drive traffic. We're in the attention economy. So my biggest thing would be prepared for that. Yeah.
Right. And even just it sounds like a mindset adjustment that, you're almost paying to learn, right?
Yes.
And going into with that mindset of testing out different angles and ads and finding what connects, I assume is going to be a big one there.
And it really varies by domain. I can imagine. So my product was in a particular category. If you're in the tabletop gaming space or the maker space, some kind of 3D printing product, Kickstarter and crowdfunding is just swimming in folks who are in that domain. And so maybe you get better organic spread in projects of that type. I don't have experience with that. In my case, it's sexual health and wellness / high-end audio. The sexual health and wellness in particular is not traditionally something that has a large representation on Kickstarter. So the organic Kickstarter growth from the community might be lower for mine. And also thinking in terms of how do you actually find your particular audience. My domain is very hard to advertise against. Meta doesn't allow you to target anything even remotely related to those categories. And so you have to get a little creative. So just thinking about your project's domain and where are the people that might be interested in it and figuring out how to get in front of them.
In solving that problem, was Meta your main platform? Did you try out any others like, TikTok or any of these short form channels, or was it mainly Meta?
It was mainly Meta. What we did wind up doing, we had a very creative marketing agency that we worked with, and they came up with a good idea. We targeted proxies of sexual health. So we can't even target like famous authors who've written about it. Meta won't let you. But Meta will let you target fans of Cosmo magazine and fans of Men's Health magazine. So like magazines that have sexual edges. We targeted musicians. We targeted dance and rave festivals and Burning Man and things like that.
Very cool. Very cool. So not only knowing your audience, but also knowing how to reach them and maybe being, creative about the way to go about that.
Yeah, and experimenting. We did try ads, for example, on a pornography network. And they didn't have high conversion. Some of that, I think, is because we had the ability to target by income, but we didn't have the ability to target by the interests that we wanted. And in particular, we didn't have the ability to target people who had expressed interest in crowdfunding. On Meta, we could intersect things like people who like Cosmo magazine and have an interest in crowdfunding. And that crowdfunding interest added a lot. That added a lot to our conversion rates. One of the agencies that we worked with did run some ads on Reddit and some on Google. Those just didn't perform quite as well. And everyone that we talked to was worried about throwing real money at TikTok. They said that you can get a lot of traffic and interest in the video, but that they had not historically seen a lot of conversion. There's a lot less purchase intent, is my understanding.
Understood. Well, I appreciate you, being really transparent and just sharing all this advice for other creators that are out there. Where can people go to learn more about Groove Thing, and where can they go to check out your campaign?
Yeah, trygroovething.com is our main domain, and currently it still redirects to the campaign. We're in the late pledge phase to collect some additional backers, but at some point we're going to wrap that up, and it will flip back over to a landing page where you can either place a pre-order or later in this year, hopefully, directly order with a shorter shipping timeline. Okay,
I'll make sure to link up both of those in the show notes so people can go and check it out. My final question for you here, and you can kind of end on this note. One would be if you have a favorite quote that you like, but other than that, it could be a final tip about crowdfunding or a word of encouragement for other creators out there. Any of those, and we can end on that note.
I think I actually do have a quote that I think does all three. Always be making new mistakes. I think it's a wonderful piece of advice. If you're not making some mistakes, you're not trying hard enough, you're not taking enough risks. And the key is to make new ones, to actually learn from the mistakes that you've made. And I've made plenty, and I like being proven wrong. I like learning new things. And so the only way to figure out the right answer is to get some wrong answers first. So iteration is key to me in many things, and I've definitely, my learning here is iteration is key during crowdfunding as well. That's the key.
I love that, and that's a great message for the perfectionist in all of us.
Yeah, exactly.
Michael, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it, and good luck with your remaining days here in late pledges.
Thanks a lot. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified Podcast. And oh man, if you are listening to this show, I guarantee you are an action taker, because most people, they have ideas, they don't do anything. It just kind of stays in their head. They don't even learn anything. They don't listen to podcasts. They don't read books, right? They're not really action takers. But the fact that you've made it this far really just cements that fact in my mind. So first of all, kudos. And if you do appreciate the work that we're putting together here with CrowdCrux and the way you put education is one of our fundamental tenets of our company, make sure you leave a positive rating and review for this podcast on iTunes. It would mean a lot to me. We also got some great content out there on my YouTube channel. If you don't know my YouTuber, you can go check me out at Salvador Briggman. We got some great content as well on my blog at Crowdcrux. But all of a sudden, I started to have a lot of people in my career when I started to put out more education coming to me and be like, Sal, I really appreciate this, man, but I just need you to kind of hold my hand and help me through this. And it's a little bit intimidating sometimes to do a new launch. And just to be honest, it's kind of hard, right? There's a lot of different moving pieces of the puzzle. And I think a lot of creators can benefit from having the proper guidance going into that campaign. Now, at the same time, you got to be willing to invest in your experience and your education and really upgrading the people that you're surrounding yourself with in order to have a successful campaign. And it will pay you dividends years into the future, what you learn when you get that proper guidance going into a launch. So you're able to dot your I's and cross your T's and make sure you're doing it right. You're even headed in the right direction. Or whether or not crowdfunding or Kickstarter is the right platform for you. There's so many unknowns in business, and I think that the best thing you can do as a business owner is to make sure that you sort of mitigate those risks. And the more you know, the easier it is to have that successful launch, but also when you're able to tap into that experience, to go into those archives of years and years of campaigns and products that I've witnessed and being able to tap into that. So I've made myself available to the community via my individual one-on-one coaching calls. And this is really for those people that are serious. They are not only, looking to take action, but they want to do this right. And they really want to understand that proven path to success. So if you want to go a layer deeper and skip through all the podcasts, go down below, go into the show notes right now and book your individual one-on-one coaching call with me. That link is crowdcrux.com/coaching. Go to that link at crowdcrux.com/coaching, and you can book an individual one-on-one coaching call with me. All you got to do is go to that link, crowdcrux.com/coaching, and you can get your call scheduled ASAP, and we can really get down to the brass tacks of how to have a successful launch. Now, some of you are like, Sal, I don't know if I'm ready to do that. Listen, I don't want to make an investment right now. I kind of want to just, learn a little bit more about the process. And I totally get that. And that's why I've also put together a free course for people just like you. So if you're there kind of hemming and hawing and you're not ready to move forward with this area of your life, you just want to learn a little bit more, go and check out my free course at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. That link is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. Again, that link is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. You can enter your name and email, and I'll start seeing some lessons to warm you up to the mechanics of crowdfunding. My man, I hope that you enjoyed today's podcast episode. Wherever you are in the world, whatever it is you're doing, move towards your goals. Make sure you're confident and bold in doing that. But I'll see you next time. I got a great episode coming out soon. Look forward to that one, and I'll see you next week.